Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that the right book at the right time can change lives, and that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do here on the KidLit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature: picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels for readers of all ages. In each episode, we'll talk with children's literature authors and discuss their books, their hopes, their dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. Whether you're an adult reading to their inner child or connecting the young readers in your life with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. So grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of KidLit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie Affinito, your KidLit loving host, inviting you back to another bookish conversation with a children's literature author. Today, I'm talking with Dan Gutman. Dan is the author of the celebrated My Weird School series, a series that recently celebrated its 100th book and its 20th anniversary. He's also written middle grade novels like Cleopatra's Needle and Houdini and Me. He's here today to talk about his newest release, The Picasso Curse. This middle grade novel follows Edwin as he weighs what to do about the $1 million Picasso doodle he found tucked behind his thrift store poster frame. It's full of history, it's full of action, and I read it in a single sitting. I can't wait to talk all about it with him, so let's get right to the episode. Dan, welcome back to KidLit Love. I'm so glad to host you here again.
Hey, Stephanie, I thought you'd be sick of me by now.
Not yet. Not yet.
Maybe next time.
So, back in episode 33, which feels like such a long time ago, you were here celebrating your 100th book and the 20th anniversary of your Weird School series. And so likely listeners have had a chance to listen to that and likely already know you, but I'd still love to start with a bit of an introduction and just have you give listeners a little bit of your backstory and the journey that you've taken through children's literature.
Sure. Yeah. I guess everybody has their, roundabout journey. And I certainly didn't, I wasn't one of these kids who said to myself as a child, oh, I'm going to grow up and become a children's book author. I wanted to be a photographer when I was a kid.
Mhm.
And I had a dark room down my basement back in the pre-digital days.
Oh,
I was
fun.
the I was the photography editor of my high school yearbook. I really love photography. As it turned out, I was just better at expressing myself with words than I was with pictures. So I went to college, and I didn't study writing. I didn't study literature or journalism. I studied psychology,
Mhm.
and after 6 years of study, I went to graduate school studying psychology. I said, I can't stand this. This is not for me. But when I was in college, there were some classes that really turned me on, and that was my art history classes. I loved art history, and I didn't see it as something I could really make a career out of, but I've always thought, it would be fun to write something about art, and I hadn't done that yet. So I've written lots and lots of books for younger kids, older kids, picture books, funny books, serious books, books about sports. And I had these two ideas knocking around in my brain for a couple of years, actually. And of course, you and your listeners are familiar with what happened at the Louvre recently, where somebody broke in broad daylight and stole like these precious gems. And it brought back what a lot of people knew about, that was not the first time the Louvre was broken into and something stolen. Back in 1911, many of us know that the Mona Lisa, the most famous painting in the world, was stolen from the Louvre and went missing for 2 years.
Yeah.
Gone. Nobody knew where it went, and it was an amazing story. And so most people know that. But what most people don't know, or didn't know anyway, was that the prime suspect of the theft of the Mona Lisa was Pablo Picasso,
I did not
who
know. Until this book, I did not know.
Most people didn't know that. He was 30 years old at the time.
Wow.
Um, and he wasn't I don't know if I could say he was world famous, but he was a revolutionary artist at the time, and just the kind of person who would be a suspect for stealing a classic Renaissance painting because he always wanted to like upset the apple cart. Anyway, they hauled him in for questioning, and and I thought, okay, the Mona Lisa was stolen for 2 years. Picasso was the main suspect. There's got to be a way to turn this into a story. It's crying out to be written, you know?
Mhm.
And I didn't really know how to put two and two together. And I would hang out with my friends and I'd say, I got these two ideas bouncing around in my head, but I don't know what to do with them, you know? And nobody could really help. And I thought, maybe I should just write it as a nonfiction book. You know, I could just tell the story.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, somebody wrote that book. A guy named Nicholas Day. Was it Nicholas Day? I have it written down. Nicholas Day. He wrote a book called The Mona Lisa Vanishes in 2023. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to do that. Somebody already did that. I
Right.
want to make it into a fictional story. And a lot of my stories, I will take a kernel of truth and build a story around it, you know? So I thought, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And I was reading an article in the paper one day, and I'm constantly reading the newspaper. I get a lot of my ideas out of the newspaper. And it was about somebody who found something in a garbage can or at an auction or something for $5, and it turned out to be priceless, you know. And every so often you hear about one of these stories. I remember there was this one guy in Pennsylvania. He bought a painting at a flea market for $5 and he brought it home and there was a copy of the Declaration of Independence stuck to the back. You know, it was worth $4 million. And I thought, bingo, I got it. When Picasso was hauled into court to be questioned about the theft of the Mona Lisa, what if and all the great ideas come from what if, you know, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Uh, what if, and he always carried a sketchbook with him wherever he went. He was constantly, you know, creating artwork. What if he drew a little doodle in his sketchbook that day? Nervously, he's waiting to be questioned. He didn't steal the Mona Lisa, but he's nervous about it. And what if he did a doodle, and once they realized that he didn't steal the Mona Lisa and they let him go, what if he disgustedly just like ripped the page out of his sketchbook, threw it in a garbage can? And what if the janitor, you know, took that sketch out of the garbage can and brought it home and put it up on his wall? And what if, you know, when that janitor died, you know, 50 years later, his possessions were put up for sale at an auction? And what if, you know, over 100 years later, that piece of paper, that sketch, that doodle that Picasso had made, what if it found its way across the Atlantic Ocean to the United States? And what if it found its way to a flea market in Illinois and some kid buys a poster at the flea market for $10, brings it home, takes the frame off of the poster, and a piece of paper slides out? And what if it was that original Picasso? I thought, that's the story. You know, the rest of the story can be all the positive and mostly negative things that happen as a result of this poor kid suddenly being in possession of a priceless piece of artwork. And that was the inspiration for the Picasso Curse. And I had so much fun writing it. And I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I did. As I said in the opening, I read it. I read it in a single sitting. I got up I love reading in the morning with my coffee, sitting next to the window, and I opened it up and I knew one chapter in, I'm not going to get up for a little while. And, you know, later on your website, you know, just getting ready for the episode, you actually have a statement on there that says like you want kids to kind of get lost in your book and then like after an hour blink and look up and be like, "Oh, like that was pretty great. That was like a movie." And that's what I felt. It was so, and I joked before we recorded, I didn't know if this word was a word. It's in a different context, but it's an immersible book. Like you just kind of get into it. And I'm so glad you talked about the what if trail because my favorite chapter was chapter 4, which is the route to Edwin Hodge, which is
Oh,
1911, this happens, and then 1951, and then 2012, 2013, and 15, and 17, and 19, and 21. I loved the visual of following that and thinking, gosh, what other what ifs are out there? This could be really, fun to explore. I just loved getting the backstory that was filled with the history, but then also the fun, right? That you were having as jumping from continent and decade to decade. Uh,
yeah.
you just instantly, in that one chapter, were just right there with Edwin, going, "Wow, okay, this is like a 1 in a million chance that he has this in his hand. What is going to happen?" And that's the fun of the book, right? Following out what is he going to do? What his parents are going to do?
Yeah.
And there's more what ifs, right? What if the art teacher didn't poke her head in the door at that exact time at show and tell? What if, what if, what if? I love the
Yeah.
structure for
I,
fun that you brought into this.
I tried to be really careful about that because when I read a story by another author and it it jumps around a lot in time, I get confused and I can't follow it.
Mhm.
So I tried to be really careful to make it clear to the reader what was happening. And I would say, like, okay, this is Edwin's story, but for the next couple of chapters, I got to talk about something different,
Yeah.
you know, so that the reader understands that, okay, we're in the same story here, but this is different. And you just got hang in there and we'll get back to Edwin in a few chapters, kind
Yes.
of thing.
Yes. And that's what I think makes it so immersible, right? Is because like you're talking directly to the reader who feels like, oh, I've got like this inside scoop, this inside information on the story that just makes it so much more enjoyable. At least in my opinion. I love when books do that.
I was a reluctant reader when I was a kid, Stephanie, and I I'm very conscious of the fact that a lot of kids, and especially a lot of boys, to be
Yeah.
honest, are reluctant readers. And so I make it a point, I try to make it a point so that each sentence flows into the one after it, each paragraph flows into the one after it, each chapter, so that my reader never has to read the same page twice,
Right.
thinking, "Oh, what happened there?" You know, it has to really flow seamlessly,
Yeah.
and that's the kind of books that I like to read. So I assume that a lot of the kids out there like to read that way as well.
Yes. Yes. And there's so much in this book that I think different readers can relate to. I mean, who wouldn't want to find a $1 million doodle stuck behind a garage sale find? But there's also relatable things in here about families and having money versus not having money, the bully at the school, the ways, that parents respond to the whole situation. Like it was so real. I could envision some people in my family saying some of the same things. I just feel like no matter what kind of reader, um, there's going to be something that you'll be able to relate to in one of these characters or one element of the plot line.
Yeah. And I had to make him a poor kid
Mhm.
intentionally because I felt it would be even more meaningful to a kid like that to find something that's
Yeah.
priceless. Years ago, I did a book called The $1 Million Shot about a kid gets the chance to take a foul shot in the middle of the NBA Finals. And if he sinks the shot, he wins $1 million. And similarly, I made that kid a poor kid too, so that there's all the more motivation for the kid to succeed,
Yeah.
actually.
And not only that, but there's a little friction between Edwin and the boy who thought he should have owned that Kobe Bryant poster first. And that is just so real as well of, I was thinking like finders keepers or snooze you lose and in a really big way in the story. So there is that tension between the characters as well that I think kids would really understand and both
Mm.
feel for both sides, which makes it
Yeah.
so relatable.
I tried to think of if I was in a situation like this, uh, what what would the result be? You know, suddenly I would have something that's priceless. Okay, so kids might want to be my friend,
Yeah.
who otherwise wouldn't. Girls might invite me to their birthday party, even though they wouldn't.
Yep.
People might accuse me of stealing the Picasso. People might try to steal the Picasso. There's all these possible things that could happen. And one of them would, from the start, I thought a bully would try and claim that he was actually the real owner of the doodle, not Edwin. And oh, by the way, Edwin Hodge, I use that name because in the apartment building that I live in, one of the doormen, his name is Edwin, and one of them, the other doorman, his last name is Hodge. So it's a little tribute to the doorman of my apartment building.
Oh, see, I love knowing Easter eggs and inside stuff like that about the books.
We
Wonderful.
always do that, Stephanie. We always do stuff like
Oh, I
that.
love that. I love that. So there's lots of, I would say, ups and downs that happen in this adventure of it's a really good thing to have, and then is it a really good thing? Or oh, it's nice and safe, or is it really nice and safe? And there's a lot of stress, that would come along with a find like this. And
Yeah.
one thing Edwin is really clear about in the beginning that I think would feel really good as a kid and also feel really scary, which we come to find out is he's like, hey, this is mine. I get to decide what to do with it. Not my parents, not the teacher, not the art director. This is mine. And that comes with a lot of responsibility as things get pretty crazy, right? With people calling his home and showing up at his home and all the things that you expect to happen to an adult who suddenly inherits money. Edwin is dealing with and has to figure out what do I do? What do I do? And I'd love for you to talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I've read, and I'm sure you have too, stories about people who have, say, won the lottery and suddenly they're
Mhm.
multimillionaires. And instead of making their lives wonderful, it often they can't handle this sudden fame and fortune, and it sometimes ruins their lives. And I thought that would make a really interesting story if this thing actually did bad things to the kid. And
Mhm.
and by the way, it's called the Picasso curse. That's not a real thing, the Picasso curse. However, just about everybody involved with Pablo Picasso died tragically or had something horrible happen to them. All his wives and mistresses, they all, either had a nervous breakdown or they committed suicide or whatever. And I thought, I'm going to have a bunch of really bad things happen to this kid. So he's like almost on the verge of a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to find a way for him to get out of it so that the ending may not be happy, may not be sad, but it's a shocker to the audience. I always like a surprise ending,
Uh-huh.
and it's satisfying in some way. And of course, we won't give away the big surprise ending, but I was really proud of that one.
Yeah, that's on my list of things to talk to you about, Dan, is
Okay, okay.
oh my goodness, the ending. So, here I am reading along, one sitting. What's going to happen? What is he going to decide? And then the ending. And that is all I will say, but it was both wonderful and oh my gosh, wait, what? Like where's the other book? Listeners, you're going to love the ending. You're going to love, love, love the ending.
I was a little concerned, and I still am, that some people might find the ending to be too it's not definitive, shall we say.
Yeah. Yeah.
It kind of leaves you hanging a little bit. But I thought that made sense in light of the rest of the story.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yes. Yeah. We really can't say too much more, but I do want to loop back to something we were talking about before we hit record, right? This idea of maybe not having the ending that is definitive, but looping back to how the story works and how Edwin was and making some of those decisions. It fits perfectly for the ending to be that way. And I'd love for you to talk about that because we talked about the idea of decision anxiety and all of this going on in Edwin's life. So I'd like for you to say a little bit about that too.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, all of us to a certain extent have what is called decision anxiety, which is when you have a major decision in your life, you're kind of tortured by it. I remember my wife and I were living in Brooklyn, New York, and we are gonna start a family. And we had to decide, should we stay where we are? Should we move to the suburbs where we can have more space, you know? Should we rent that apartment down the hall? And I remember like laying in bed at night, just like staring at the ceiling, thinking, I don't know what to do. You know, this
Yeah.
is like a major life decision. And, we have these decisions all the time. And some of us really become paralyzed with them. And in Edwin's case, once he finds this piece of artwork, he has to decide, should I hang on to it?
Yeah.
Should I sell it? Should I give it away? Should I destroy it? I don't know what to do. And he's one of these kids who is faced with decisions, and he kind of, as I put it in the book, kicks the can down the road.
Mhm.
I'm not going to make the decision now. I'll make it another time. I can't make that decision. And I think that's something that everybody can relate to in
Yeah.
our lives. And it wasn't until I was like almost finished with the book that I realized that's a big theme of the book, Edwin's decision anxiety.
Yeah.
So I kind of went back and kind of punched that up a little bit more powerfully,
Yeah.
to make it a more obvious part of the story that readers could relate to.
Very much relate to, at least this reader, right? It was like seeing what that freeze almost response of I'll deal with it later. But one thing I did not freeze on, I have to admit, I read your book in one sitting and I had my phone close by because I couldn't help but start to look up stuff, of what is the real part and which one is the fiction part. So I really love how at the end, and again, we won't give away the actual ending, but there is a section at the end that is facts and fictions. And
Oh yeah.
I'd love for you to talk about that because I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I've done that lots of times in my books. In all my baseball card adventure books, if people remember them, I would always have a chapter at the end basically saying facts and fictions. And I'd explain, what actually was real and what I made up. And I figure that's only fair to the reader. And especially, when teachers want to use these books as curriculum, they want their students to know
Yeah.
what was made up and what was real. So I did that here. And the guy who actually the guy who actually stole the Mona Lisa back in 1911, he was this guy named Vincenzo Perugia, who was from Italy. And the reason why he stole the Mona Lisa was because he wanted to return it to Italy, where it had been originally painted by Leonardo back in the 1500s.
Yeah.
That nobody knew what the motivation was for stealing the Mona Lisa, but that's what it turned out to be. And he was caught because, of course, he tried to sell it. And like, what are you going to do? So, I'd like to buy the Mona Lisa. You're going to get in trouble. So I told uh, that, I don't remember the other facts that I laid out at the ending, but I feel an obligation to the reader to, when I'm going to take a real thing and build a story around it, I feel like it's only fair to tell them what I made up and what was real.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a book for me that just sparked a lot of little rabbit holes as I went down, through Google. And I imagine that as young readers will look at it, number one, they're all going to start to be thrift store hunters because you never know.
You never
Um,
know.
but just the idea of diving into that little piece of history that I did not know, as much about, I imagine it sparks interest in that for them. And I can't help but go back to, you're taking an art history course, you loved photography, and it just feels like it came full circle now that I know all this background knowledge about you for the book.
Yeah, it was fun to. I guess the my previous book about Cleopatra's Needle was also somewhat about art, but this was really about painting art.
Yeah.
And by the way, my wife, she we met because she used to be an illustrator herself, actually,
Oh,
and she doesn't do it anymore. But now she is a docent at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York here. And so, I've always loved art, and I spend a lot of time at the museum. It just, I like to look at beautiful things.
yes. Yes. So as you picture this book being read by kids who will probably read it in one sitting, like I did, what is your hope for the book or your hope for readers who get to read it and experience it.
Well, of course, I hope that they'll come to appreciate art more than they did before. It's not something that we really teach, I don't think, in elementary schools. Uh, it
Not
wasn't
as
until,
much. Yeah.
it wasn't until college that I learned anything. But more than that, I just, you know, some authors like they try to have like lessons in their stories, and all I want to do is entertain people and as you said, open up a book and like an hour later look up and think, wow, that didn't even feel like I was reading,
Yeah.
It felt like I was watching a movie in my head. And I've noticed lately that, sometimes when I'm reading an article or something, that I'm conscious of the fact that I'm reading. I'm seeing the words. Other times, if like the author did a really good job,
Yes.
I don't even see the words on the page. It's like I'm just visualizing what's happening. And that's what I try to accomplish. And I think it makes reading more effortless and more fun
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I agree. That's a sign of a really good book for me when I'm trying to recall the book and tell it to someone. And I think, did I read that? Or was that a movie I watched? And you have a hard time distinguishing between the two. That is
Yeah.
such an
It's
important
like you
point.
experience it, but you're not reading individual words on the page. And
Yeah.
that's great if you can accomplish that.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know?
Your book accomplished that. Your book
Oh,
will accomplish that. I loved this book.
I'm trying.
Yes, well, it's working. And so speaking of course, I want to ask you, like, are there things in the future you can give us some sneak peeks on before you leave?
I can tell you about two things. Yeah. The next I just finished this act. I pretty much spent the summer writing another middle grade novel. And it's also kind of fanciful. Um, it's called Time Writer. And it's about a magical typewriter. Okay. I'm kind of
Oh,
I'm kind of obsessed with typewriters, actually.
yes. I have a very old typewriter. I love them too.
Do you really? What do you have? What kind?
I have no idea, but it looks so wonderful to look at it. It's not, I can't find anybody to fix it where I
Ah,
live. So it's not workable, but it's just so inspirational as I look at it and think of how many words came out of that typewriter.
I can tell you where to get it fixed.
We will have to connect. Yes.
Okay. Um, I don't own a typewriter currently, but when I first started a million years ago, I was writing on a typewriter, and I'm kind of
Yep.
fascinated by them. And so I thought, what if, okay, what if a kid found a typewriter like in his grandfather's attic or something like that? And what if this typewriter had the capability that you could type a message on it to anyone in history,
Mm.
and they would type a message back, and the keys would start clacking like a player piano, works. Like
Yes.
that would be so cool. So I wrote a story called Time Writer. I don't have a publisher for it yet, but I'm been working on it, and I think it's probably the best thing I ever wrote. So hey, maybe next year I'll come back and we could talk about that.
Oh, yes. I can't wait to get my hands on that one. That sounds so wonderful.
That's one project. The other project is also kind of interesting, which is that I've been doing this My Weird School series for over 20 years now,
Yeah.
and we're past 100 books now. And HarperCollins, which is the publisher, they have asked me and the illustrator, Jim Pelot, to take the first four books that we wrote 21 years ago, which is Miss Daisy is Crazy, Mr. Klutz is Nuts, Mrs. Rupee is Loopy, and Ms. Hannah is Bananas, and adapt them into graphic novels.
Oh, wow.
So I've done a few graphic novels with Jim already, three of them actually, and it's a completely different experience than writing on a computer.
Yeah.
I don't use my computer at all. I draw pictures, and cartoon balloons and stick figures,
Yeah.
and it's really different and challenging and fun. So we're doing that with the first four My Weird School books because graphic novels, as I'm sure you know, are really hot right now.
Yes. Yes. I actually just talked to Rachel Renee Russell and Nikki Russell, who just adapted the first two of the Dork Diaries to graphic novels for exactly the same reason. Just another audience to reach, another way to get the books out and to just keep following the kids, who want to hang on to the stories. That's
Yeah.
exciting.
So that's what I'm working on now.
Yeah, good things ahead. Oh, wonderful. Well, where can listeners find you so that they can keep track of when all of this might be able to be available to them?
Well, thanks for asking, Stephanie. Uh, People can always go to my website, which is just www.dangutman.com. And I also post daily on my Facebook fan page, on Instagram, and on Blue Sky at Dan Gutman Books. So check them out. I, I don't just spend the whole time plugging my books. Sometimes I just have some interesting thought that I think people would find fascinating, so I will write about that. But that's how people can get in touch with me.
Okay. So I will put links, all of those links in the show notes. I, of course, will put links to the Picasso curse in the show notes. And I'm just excited you came back again. Yes, we'll have to make third time's a charm whenever the next things come your way.
That would be great. I'm always happy to come over there by Zoom as we are. And I really appreciate your having me on and helping to share my books with your listeners.
Oh, happy to. Thank you for coming. And listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of KidLit Love. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the KidLit Love podcast. You'll find links to all of the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. You'll also find KidLit Love on Substack. That's where you'll find posts for each episode, monthly KidLit roundups, and an invitation to join my summer book club and go deeper into the world of children's literature. And if you loved this podcast and want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing to build a life you love. One more thing. If you loved what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of Kid Lit Love. Thanks for listening.